just going to sneak up and take a picture?
It's a hot spot.
They're good. They're really good.
We just asked Katie, she can look it up.
There's a footnote like a page and a half later in City Temple, and I'm like, well, I'm using it right a second, that's part of the second. He mentioned a few in the 50s, I don't know if there's no application, because that book was.
Oh, another board. You can get that. A board meeting on Wednesday. I've been on the board for 40 years. I put her on the bench.
Oh, wow, 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
Love it.
By the way, call to order the regular meeting of the City of Carmel Historic Resources Board meeting for Monday, May 20th. Roll call, please.
Board Member Dyer.
Here.
Board Member Goodhue.
Here.
Board Member Pomeroy.
Here.
And Board Members Croman and Hall are absent today.
Okay. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now for public appearances. Under the Brown Act, public comments for matters on the agenda must relate to that agenda item, and public comments for matters not on the agenda must relate to the subject matter jurisdiction of this legislative body. Hateful, violent, or threatening speech is impermissible public comment as it disrupts the conduct of the public meeting. This is a warning that if any member of the public attending this meeting remotely violates the Brown Act by failing to comply with these requirements of the Brown Act meeting, that speaker will then be muted. So any public announcements? Okay, seeing none. Doesn't look like there's any items on the consent agenda, so we go to our first order of business, the Historic Context Statement, Phase 2 Monthly Update. It's a status report and discussion of the partial draft dated May 13th, 2024 by past consultants. Staff report, please.
Good afternoon. So we don't actually have a staff report. This is just our monthly check-in. You received a partial draft published on Friday, and we have our past consultant authors here today. And if anyone listening needs to be caught up on the context statement update, I'd recommend going back to the March Historic Resources Board meeting where we did a presentation on the project that discussed the funding and the reasons for this Phase 2 update and what we're trying to accomplish. But today, You've only had this partial draft for a few days, so today we're not looking to edit it word by word or anything like that, but we just want to show you that progress is happening and get your thoughts just on this an early look. And then, as we discussed last month, the direction we're taking with this Phase 2 update is retiring the existing context statement and adopting a new one that is significantly more streamlined and easier for the public to use. So with that, I'll let Seth and Kent come up and kind of give you their introduction to the work product so far.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine.
My name is Seth Bergstein, owner of Past Consultants, and my partner here,
Kent Stevie?
sub-consultant. So you gotta crouch a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me know if this,
No, we're good.
if we're good here. So anyway, 30% draft. We are through. Has anybody had any time to look at it? I'm just curious first, so I can get. Okay. So we've had some time. So you can see what we spent a fair amount of time on, which is relatively cookie cutter, is to get all the policy up front there, so folks could see, particularly someone new to the city that might buy property, maybe the building's potentially historic. What's all the policy that supports what we're doing, why we're doing the historic context statements? If you had a chance to compare it to the original, just to get an idea of how much more direct and to the point the table of contents is. It's policy, it's dividing the city's historical and architectural development into a set of discrete themes, and then it's analyzing the buildings that would be constructed within that time period and whether they would be significant or not. That's pretty much in a nutshell what we've got so far. And Eric, you attended our little subcommittee meeting when we were considering maybe incorporating the old document as a first volume, pull out some of the initial chapters, since we've completely rewritten in this new one a historic context for the prehistory period, which I know is something that the committee really wanted, especially Jordan. I know he's not here today. So that theme is done. I had other intentions of maybe incorporating this still within the document, and I think as a team, particularly coming from Marnie and Catherine's leadership, the best way to deal with this is just to retire the old document. One of the biggest issues with the old document is I can't even pull stuff out and cite it and use it because there's no citations. Though you'll see 2 or 3 pages of text and there's no citation, and there's 30 names mentioned, 20-year, 40-year time period. I was hoping to weave it into some kind of historical narrative and keep it. I think as time goes by, we flesh out more of this, we get further into the writing of it. I think other sub-themes will come out. I think there needs to be a lot of talk about women in Carmel, a lot of talk about the arts in Carmel. And I think it could be useful in that area. But we're really just getting into the first 2 themes. So when you see it, there's not a lot of, you don't see a lot of evaluative tables yet because we're up to 1902, which is all we've written about so far, and there's really almost no buildings left. And that's why you only see, matter of fact, Marnie, if you guys are manning it, where is our thematic chart? Let's go to page 38. So, okay, so can someone scroll to page 38? Is that possible?
It's not scrolling.
Okay, and then that's okay, we could start there. So essentially, every theme will have this structure. So, associated property types, registration requirements, we will be categorizing all the architectural styles that occur within the thematic time period. In this case, we're 1888 to 1902, so the city's, the Devendorf map is not even developed yet. So that's how early we are in this case. So the only styles really there are what we're calling early vernacular, and we drove the town. We don't see more than 1 or 2 Queen Anne buildings, but there's a very important Queen Anne building, the Abby Jane Hunter House, so obviously that was featured for that property style. But you'll see the style, the list of character defining features, And then if you go to page 40, or the next page, one more after that, that's our other early style. You'll see a historic significance chart for each time period, and then you'll also see, and this is just format here right now. We didn't fully flesh this out yet. But if you want to get a look at that, we did flesh it out for the 66 to 86 update, which we did last year, and it'll pretty much mirror that. Needless to say, when we get into the next two time periods, particularly not Seacoast, Bohemia, the Spanish Revival period, there's going to be a lot of building styles listed. We're just not there yet. But we're at 30%. We wanted to at least give you an idea of what the writing style is, the efficiency of the writing, and its use as an evaluative document, as a tool. If we were a little wordy on some of the policy, forgive us, but I just think it's important to have that there. It's important to have since we're getting such a wonderful grant from the state, to have the state's publications quoted. I have the federal publication quoted as well. And I know, Eric, you were interested in this. I don't know if you got a chance to read it, but how to use the document. I wouldn't say it's complete yet, but we've got the bulk of how someone coming out of the coal. That's on page 9. What's that?
No, I said I really appreciated seeing people having a chance to get an introduction to what historic preservation law is about and how we determine what's historic and what's not.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is. I mean, it adds bulk to the document. It does, and arguably you can go to the appropriate ordinance, online and figure it out yourself. But this codifies it. So person X comes into town and they want to buy a house, and it's a 1928 house, and they go, well, I don't know, is it historic? My realtor didn't tell me, or something. Or first of all, they can check the inventory and see if it's on the inventory, of course. But the document is designed for that person X to go, okay, here's my house. It looks Spanish, but I don't know. If this is Spanish, why is it now not stucco anymore? It's been changed. So they would go to the appropriate chart and see if there's enough integrity. And we have essentially our 3 levels of historic significance. Those charts will guide them to whether that building has enough integrity to qualify for what we call a C3 listing for architecture or design, or whether there's a support within the historic context for historical developments that would give it an associative listing. And of course, in a phase 1 historic assessment, we will be researching ownership anyway. So significant persons analysis is pretty much going to be the same theme to theme. The question is, after we research who lived in there and what he or she did, then we would, of course, then comparing it to other properties, figure out whether it's a B. But this is really a document about analyzing buildings. Can't really stress that enough. It's not about knowing everything about Carmel. And there's a lot of writers who've written about Carmel. Because we're rewriting, one thing I will say is that we're spending a lot of time rewriting a history that I didn't really anticipate rewriting, and it's really an exercise of gathering sources like we've all done before in school and writing, which is fine. We're pretty efficient at it, but it's taking away building evaluation time, which is a little frustrating to us. But that's okay, because it's also teaching me anyway. He knows everything, but it's teaching me a lot more about what I need to know as one of your historic consultants anyway. So that's totally fine. But anyway, I'd like to just leave it open to questions or comments.
I'm trying to remember what's considered the first building in Carmel. Is that the one below San Antonio?
The Murphy House.
The what?
The Murphy House.
The Murphy?
Murphy, I think, yes.
First Murphy.
Yes, exactly.
Which
First
has now
Murphy.
been moved
Not
to six.
second Murphy, first Murphy, yes.
Yeah, but
What about the one below near Pebble Beach Gate?
we couldn't find it. We went looking for
We
it.
went looking for it.
Well, they
haven't-
added to it. It's been reviewed by Historic Resources before.
Yeah, but with the eucalyptus out of the way, we didn't go on private property
Yeah.
to see if it was in there. If it's in there,
There must be a
certainly
DPR
is
on
listed,
it.
and we've got a map in here that
Yeah,
shows
I'm
the
sure there
original
is.
5
And
or 6 buildings.
there's a whole application review that was done. So the file is probably pretty full of information on that with photographs. And I'm just trying to remember the style of it. That's why I'm.
It's basically a log cabin. I mean,
Yeah,
It's kind of a log cabin.
Yeah, well, that's the Murphy barn, right? I mean, that was the.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just so vernacular. And
I forget the name of it. Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion. This is going to come out later in this report. Is we really want to try to particularly from requests from Marnie and Catherine, understand what a Carmel cottage is, which is what we're going to eventually call a Carmel cottage. But these early vernacular buildings are just built on Eastern precedents with available materials. There's not a lot to them, you know, and you're not going to see
Or the
more of them in
pattern
the
book.
future. Yeah, or pattern books. So you're not going to see them in the future anyway. But yeah, I'd like to get it in there. So I'll make a note to find.
But we
the
have an
documentation
historic
of it.
image.
How many buildings were actually built in Carmel that are still existing prior to 1902? Do we have an idea of that? They're probably all in the inventory, I assume.
Maybe.
Three or four.
And
There's
one
the-
of them, which was the.
There's the Turner House, right?
Yes, exactly.
On
Yeah.
Monteverde, which
Yeah,
we
and
did,
then
yeah.
the other one was in, and I can't find it anymore. It's not, doesn't seem to be there. And that was a small vernacular cottage that was used for a horse remount for the stagecoach. And what was Tortilla Flat.
And there's the Dallas Goldsmith house is over on Carpenter,
And that's in good
which is
condition.
photographed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For your.
And that
Yeah.
was added to.
Yeah, and
In
from
the
a
rear. Yeah.
terminology, we'll probably want to get more nitty gritty, Eric, as we get further along, especially I know you want to be involved with that. But for right now, we're calling this early Carmel vernacular. We're not sure yet because we just haven't studied the buildings enough. But if you look at other historic context statements, say for, we like to use Pacific Grove as the model because it's a good document, but they have vernacular in 4 or 5 different time periods. And their CDFs, or character defining features, aren't really that different for each. So we like to make a distinction on how to look at those buildings because they're coming up a lot. I think they're going to need a much higher standard of historic integrity and original materials, and that's going to probably not be very common. I mean, almost everyone we see to photograph is
Been altered in
has
some
been
way.
altered, and a lot. You know, and that's one of the. This is we have to deal with it, but as we said in the update last year, it's very difficult to get a photograph of an unaltered building stylistically in this town. They're changed so often. That brings me to what planners have kind of decided with us is, do we just use photographs that are on the inventory? I think you're going to run into problems because for certain buildings, they're not going to be good examples on the inventory. But the instruction we're getting is to focus on buildings that are listed in the Excel spreadsheet. If we have enough
We know
styles.
they are there, that they have been identified and recorded.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they're on the inventory, they should be historic and not have lost integrity, so.
Absolutely.
They should have enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. They should have that's part of the thinking too. Whether we go out and do the photos, well, we just haven't gotten into analysis yet.
I think new photos really make sense considering that.
We would like to.
The DPRs are just
Yeah.
not well.
Yeah. So we may have to do
It's not-
some
I mean, the newer
arranging
ones
with-
are, but, you know,
Yeah, we
they
may
didn't have
to do some
iPhones in
arranging.
1960, so.
I was kind of surprised to see Queen Anne style coming up as the first style analyzed. You're going to analyze the other styles in the same way?
It's the earliest style. It's the earliest
Queen
style in
Anne is the
town.
earliest style?
Yes.
Before Duckworth's house?
Yeah.
Well, Duckworth is not a stylistic house. It's a type of house.
It's a vernacular
You
house.
have a vernacular house.
Yes,
But
but it-
then you have, that's a type.
yes.
These are styles.
Well, it'd be nice to see them fitted in there somewhere.
Oh, what?
Fit what in?
Duckworth's in there.
It's on.
Well, I know so the type, a definition of that type.
It's in there. It's on page 30.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that far.
Page 30.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the job of the document.
My computer just ended there.
It's okay. I have computer problems every day. Don't worry. The idea is as many styles as we can come up with within each time frame. You know, so
Yep.
that's why you don't see a lot yet because there just wasn't
Yeah, I
much done
understand,
before
yeah.
too. Yeah. But yeah, Duckworth is in there. The Turner House. Turner House is an interesting house because it's so altered now. When you see the early photo in Kent's book, it really does look vernacular. It's just in brick, right? It's just a gable-on-wing house. But now
and
it's
the porch-
so altered. You have the porch addition. You have the addition here.
Well,
it
the
doesn't look
addition-
vernacular anymore. To me, it looks almost Queen Anne. That's the reason why we didn't.
I think, and the
photograph
porch was, I think what makes it look Queen Anne almost.
it. Yeah, it does. So it's been highly altered, and there aren't a lot of brick houses in Carmel. So
But there are a lot of
stylistically,
stone houses. And Turner had a lot to do with the stone houses, especially early on in the 20s.
But I think the addition was, even though it was still well over 50 years old, and you could almost consider it historic in itself.
Yeah, it's just not, it doesn't communicate this early Carmel vernacular style we're trying to show at this time
Yeah.
period, because it's just so
Yeah, I agree.
altered.
I agree.
You know, anyway, your thoughts?
I think he covered it. Any
I'm
questions?
questioning if this is actually Abby Hunter's house, that you, the first example of a Queen Anne. Did she actually live there?
Yes.
She did, okay.
She did.
Yeah.
And it's very important because you've got her there, and then you've got the Tudor, not the Tudor, but the English, Tudor type, English 18th century, which is also by a woman, 1905.
Yeah.
So women are building houses here,
Yeah.
3, right off the bat.
I have a question off the topic. Did Duckworth not buy the sand dunes down to the beach? Who owned that property?
That somebody was mining
Sand on the whole, everything south of Santa Fe? I'm not Santa Fe, I'm
I
sorry.
think so, yeah.
Yeah.
That was another Murphy.
Oh,
There
that
were
was
two
the-
Irishmen down
that was
there,
the
the
same,
Murphys.
yeah, it was the first Murphy, yeah.
Yeah.
His wife.
The
I think.
first Murphy.
Yeah.
From our perspective.
There you go again, his wife was having them mine sand.
There you go.
Okay, well, thanks, guys.
Okay.
Keep on going.
All right, so we have a green light. Because that was one big question I had, because it's just such a different looking document.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the introduction and the time spent discussing what a historic context statement is, what the standards of interiors are, what makes, what constitutes integrity, that's nice to have it in one place in a city document, so when
Yeah.
Well,
all of us
it's-
gets asked on the street
intention
about
is-
it,
yeah,
we
the
can
intention
refer to
is create a
something.
tool.
Yep, I think it's great.
Excellent. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
'Cause sometimes you spend a lot of time writing, and you wonder if you're writing yourself into a corner. So, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public like to address this topic, opening the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any comments from our board?
There is
Oh,
someone with their hand up online.
okay. So we'll open the public hearing and have whoever is there to comment.
Cindy Lloyd, you can unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Lloyd. I just had 2 comments to make. One is that I lived in the Duckworth house at one point. Eric Byrne was my dad's good friend, and he moved across the road and married Dorothy. And so the house was vacant, and I had 2 little children, and I moved into the Duckworth house. The other one was when my grandparents came to Carmel in 1911, it was my grandmother who bought the property from Devendorf, another woman who was instrumental in getting people to Carmel rather than my grandfather. So those are just offhand comments, but thank you very much, because it will be very nice to see a finished document.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. Kent, you have another?
Just a comment, Eric Byrne's house is listed because Eric Byrne wrote his publication from that house in Carmel.
Got it.
His whole work came out of that house. So that's where you hit association.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? No?
No one else online, sir.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any more comments from the board?
Don't think so.
Okay.
So, but just before we move on, so there will be additional progress drafts that come forward? Yeah. So you'll see another iteration as the document continues to develop. And we just wanted to make sure that we're going down the right path as far as the approach to the document in retiring the existing one and having a new one. So I didn't hear any feedback from the board that you're concerned about that approach, but if you have any thoughts on that, we'd love to hear it.
And for the next board meeting, I don't know if we'll be here, but we certainly can if you want. That's why you hire us. We live here. But we'll get at least one more theme in. Hoping for 2, but the 20s period's a lot of buildings. So let's just see how we do. We've got a month.
Yeah, I think I would just give one suggestion is that, if we can have these things distributed to the board, earlier than maybe the agenda standardly goes out, if we have it in hand, because I think it takes a little more than a weekend to give you some feedback. So
Okay.
I would if we have it a week or
That would help.
10 days
yeah.
before, then we could have a chance to really go in detail. Maybe that would give the chance to the board to have some constructive ideas when you come back.
Yeah, that sounds good. So given that we're probably at 3 weeks, probably safely we'll have one more theme done, but at least you'll see more of the analytical parts of it, so you can get a better feel for it.
Okay.
So, yeah, that should be doable in the next 3 weeks.
I agree with retiring the original document.
Yeah.
I think it would make it unwieldy and confusing.
Yeah, we worked a lot of time going back and forth trying to figure this out in conversations with Marnie and Catherine too. A lot of work is put into it. There's good information, but it's hard to pin down from a scholarly point of view, from sources. And it's not visual at all, and there is no buildings in it really. But yeah, I was hoping to throw it in historic context, but it's not reading right. And I can't pull out snippets of it because it's not referenced properly. When we have a footnote in our document, that's the reference. If you ever want to go check it, that'll be the reference, and then we can have confidence in that. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Onwards.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, anything else? Okay, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is a proclamation. I think it should be maybe read aloud so the public could hear it. Would you like to do that, Marnie, or do you like? Okay.
So the next item is a draft proclamation recognizing the 100th anniversary of the construction of the first fairy tale cottage by Hugh Comstock. So this is just a draft. The intent was to put something together that the board could respond to. So we'd like to solicit input this evening from the board and the public. We'll make any revisions, and then we'll bring this back to you at the next meeting for final approval, and then take it to the city council at their July meeting to be officially proclaimed. So the draft proclamation reads, "A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea celebrating the 100th anniversary of the first storybook cottage constructed by Hugh W. Comstock in Carmel-by-the-Sea. Whereas in 1924, Hugh White Comstock traveled to Carmel-by-the-Sea and married Mayada Brown, creator of the popular Otsy Totsy rag dolls. And whereas later that same year, Mr. Comstock designed and constructed a small fairy tale cottage as a showroom for his wife's Otsy Totsy rag dolls, originally known as the Dollhouse and recognized today as Gretel. And whereas in 1925, Mr. Comstock designed and constructed another fairy tale cottage, which came to be known as Hansel. And whereas the design and construction of the Hansel and Gretel cottages was the birth of the storybook-style cottage in Carmel-by-the-Sea, and whereas many residents who saw the enchanting and quaint cottages requested similar houses, which led to Comstock's career as a designer builder. And whereas 16 storybook-style cottages designed by Mr. Comstock are recognized on the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea local historic inventory. And whereas the fairy tale cottages are a local treasure and world-renowned, drawing visitors from across the globe. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the mayor, on behalf of the city council and the residents, hereby celebrate the 100th anniversary of the first storybook cottage designed and constructed by Hugh White Comstock in Carmel-by-the-Sea.
I like it. Any comments from the board or questions on that?
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody? Catherine?
Good afternoon, members of the Historic Resources Board. Catherine Gualtieri. I'm delighted. I'm really excited about this, and I'm glad we solved the mystery of Gretel came first and then Hansel, as Marnie said at the last meeting, which sounded so odd to us, having heard the story of the fairy tale itself. But I think this is a good, very good proclamation, and it hits all the salient points, and I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public like to address this item?
No one online, sir.
Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Anything more from the board? I guess we need to vote to recommend this to the city council and the mayor.
Yes, so if you're okay with it in its current format, I did leave some blank whereases if there was anything you felt needed to be added, but we can certainly finalize this version if there are no revisions. And I don't know if you have any direction. We thought July was a timely month for the proclamation because it immediately precedes the events that are planned.
That may, Catherine, would you mind coming up again, just because you may have, I know you've been to the last meeting of the Comstock Committee. It's going to be moved.
Yeah, they decided at the last meeting, I'm sorry that we didn't update you all, the Comstock Centennial Group informally decided that it was too much pressure and there was not enough time to really do a good job on organizing three separate issues, three separate events, which would be a lecture, a private evening at the Comstock cottages, and then a public tour on the weekend. So with the approval of the owners of the cottages, Bobby and Mike Boris, we decided that we would just go ahead and try to combine it with the September annual Carmel Heritage Society House and Garden Tour. So it will be part of that, which makes a lot of sense. And it does give everyone more time to have a really good event.
I guess there's one thought I had, which was, since we have a little extra time, maybe put this on our July agenda, just in case, for example, the Vorises may have a comment on this. I don't know.
That would be good.
Just
Yeah.
gives them a little more time to.
Yeah, we have time.
Comment. Yeah. So I would, thank you, Catherine. Close the public hearing. So yeah, I think I may recommend a motion to continue the item to our July agenda, or June agenda.
June agenda. I do believe that Bobby Voris might be on Zoom. Do you see her on there?
I do. She has her hand.
Oh, she has her hand up. Okay.
It wasn't that before.
So we'll open the public hearing and help.
Okay, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just did. Hi, this is Bobby Voris. I'm in Sacramento, couldn't be there today, but would like to have been. The only comment I would make on the proclamation is that I do know that Hugh and Mayana actually lived in Gretel for the first year of their marriage. They only lived there for a year. And so I don't know if you'd really consider it a workshop for her dolls. I mean, she was making her dolls in there, yes, but it was also their home. And I don't know if that makes any difference to the proclamation or not.
Okay.
And that's all I have to add.
Thank you. So, I mean, I still think we have a little time, so maybe just recommending we continue the item, and then we could nail down that first statement a little tighter based on Bobby's comment. Bless you. No, she is okay. So did you want to clarify what she was saying, or? Okay.
No, I was just gonna say that the original building permit is dated August of 1924. So if the board has any recommendations on when they would like the council to read the proclamation.
What's the date again? August?
The council meeting, or?
No, what did you say? It was just the building permit is August, I guess just in August.
The city issued the building permit in August of 1924.
So I think in the August meeting of the council, that would be appropriate, right? So if we actually finalized and voted the recommendation to them in July, that would be enough time? Okay. That makes sense to everybody.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so someone want to make a motion of continuance based on, and I don't know if we haven't quite determined the language that to make it a little more compatible to what Bobby was saying, but we could do that in the meantime.
I move that the proclamation be continued until a future time
I would,
for reconsideration.
to the July meeting. I think we need to, yeah.
To the July meeting.
I'll second that.
That's to the July HRB
Yes.
meeting? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, roll call, please.
Board Member Dyer?
Yes.
Board Member Goodhue?
Yes?
Board Member Pomeroy?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
motion carries.
Okay, we're moving on to the next item, which is HE 24042 Dunham, consideration of a preliminary determination of historic ineligibility for the property located on Santa Fe Street 5 northwest of 3rd. Staff report, please, Catherine.
All right, I'll be presenting the Dunham application, which, as Board Member Dyer said, is consideration of a preliminary determination of historic ineligibility for the property located at Santa Fe Street, 5 northwest of 3rd Avenue. As quick background, in February of this year, the city contracted historic consultant Margaret Clovis prepared a Phase 1 initial historic evaluation and determined that a Phase 1 intensive historic evaluation was not recommended due to apparent loss of integrity. At that time, staff concurred with Ms. Clovis's assessment and did issue a preliminary determination of ineligibility for the Carmel Historic Resources Inventory. This evening, the board is here to reconsider that determination. The municipal code does give the board 10 days from the date of the staff decision to call a determination of ineligibility up for review. And Carol Hall, who's not here today, but she is a Historic Resources Board member, and she submitted a request to staff to agendize this application for discussion. So that's why we're here today. As additional background, this is a 1925 craftsman cottage. The original owner was Roy Frades, and he worked as a contractor for M.J. Murphy. So while we do not have original plans or the original permit, it is quite likely that either Frades built the home, potentially with some involvement by Murphy. We don't know at this point. And then in 1951, there was a second-story addition. So what you can see in the photo there, that second story dates to 1951. Interestingly, 2 years later, in 1953, the entire building was relocated from Junipero between 5th and 6th to its current location on Santa Fe. And then more recently, in 2001, a project involved rear additions, rear decks, reconstructing the chimney, and a detached garage. So there are a few notable owners of this home. Roy Frades was our former police chief in the 1940s, and then Keith Evans was a former mayor of Carmel from 1940 to 1942. However, and I'll talk more about this in detail, but the consultant and the staff opinion is that the property no longer retains integrity due to the documented and permitted changes. So these are the potentially notable owners. As I mentioned, Roy Frades was a contractor for M.J. Murphy and might have built the home. And Roy Frades, after being a contractor, joined the police force and later became the police chief. He was also, as the homeowner and applicant has brought to our attention, he was the grandson of Cristiano Machado, who's credited with preserving the Carmel mission and discovering the burial site of Junipero Serra. And then Keith Evans did own the home while he was mayor of Carmel from 1940 to 1942. So after these two notable owners owned the home. That's when the second story was added and the building was relocated. So if the board was to consider a potential significance with either of these individuals, it's important to understand that Roy Frates had already sold the building when he became police chief, and his grandfather, Mr. Machado, is not at all associated with the Santa Fe property. So the home really needs to illustrate a person's important achievements and their productive life, specifically the period when they achieved significance. And typically properties that pre or post-date those significant accomplishments are not eligible. So Roy built and lived in the home before he was ever police chief. And then for Keith Evans, he did own the property when he was mayor, and there might be a significant association there, but as I'm going to discuss more, the loss of integrity does disqualify it from listing on the inventory. So to talk a little bit about integrity, there was a second story addition built in 1951. You can see that outlined in red. We don't know who built this addition. And it's pretty visible on top of the original single-story cottage. Stylistically, it matches the Craftsman home, and it is not at all differentiated. So Standard 9 of the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation do require that new additions are compatible, but also, quote, differentiated from the original home. And this addition is not at all differentiated in terms of its style and various architectural features. And then in terms of its massing, it's not particularly set back or differentiated via, say, a hyphen volume. And Preservation 14 says that a new addition should always be subordinate to the historic building. And the staff opinion is that the addition isn't particularly subordinate. And it's the second story addition really is the primary factor in our mind for the building losing integrity. So then more recently in 2001, there was a project that involved more additions in the rear, so additions and new decks, and they are not as visible as the 1951 addition. Here's a site plan from 2001. The area shaded in green is what's original to 1925. Here are photos of those 2001 additions in the rear, at the second story and the first story, and new decks as well. And then in 2001, there was also work done to the chimney. It was made significantly taller to conform with more current building code to ensure that it rose above that second story ridge line. It also was re-veneered with new stone. So it's much taller and has new cladding, and it is prominently visible from the right-of-way, so that's something we heavily take into consideration. There is also a new detached garage. The staff feels that this does not particularly impact the integrity of the property. I'm just calling it attention to the fact that it was built. There was also some minor fenestration changes in 2001, but these appear to be secondary to the addition and the chimney work. They are called minor. So that 2001 project was entitled before our current historic preservation ordinance was adopted, so it was not evaluated as a potential historic resource at that time. If the project were to come to us today, it would have triggered the evaluation that we're doing now. So the board's familiar, but for anyone else listening, these are the criteria to determine whether a property is eligible for the historic inventory, A, B, C, and D. Two of those are shoulds and two are shall, and B is a shall. Shall retain substantial integrity. Because of that language shall, integrity must be maintained regardless of whether the other criteria are met, which we'll talk more about. But the association with lives of important people is not alone a sufficient cause to list a property. And we can come back to this if we want to talk more about integrity. There are 7 aspects: location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And a property needs to maintain most, not all, but most of these 7 aspects of integrity. So again, this is just a staff assessment here, but we feel that there have been substantial changes to the property over time, and they do not appear to be limited to compatible or removable replacements. So in red are the ones I feel have been lost. In terms of location, the property was moved from its original location to its current location. It definitely does not retain integrity of location. In terms of design, there's been a 2nd-story addition and rear additions, and the massing has been significantly altered. Setting, the current setting is more residential than its original setting. You could argue it's not too much different of a setting. We're talking about a few blocks here from more downtown to more residential, but materials, an argument could be made that there's original material still. However, we have lost the original material of the chimney, but there are wood windows remaining. And then workmanship, there's bird's mouth rafters in the eaves, so that's kind of, it's like a notched profile in the eaves that we still see. But we've lost that chimney. And then feeling, we feel that additions and alterations do significantly detract from the 1920s Carmel cottage feeling. And in terms of association, the 2 notable owners owned the home before the 2nd story was constructed. So if it was found to be significant for association with one of those individuals, then there would be a period of significance that dates to their ownership, and there have been significant changes following. So in terms of how does relocating a building affect its integrity, the California Register does allow buildings to be moved if they were moved for the purposes of preservation, and we don't know why this building was moved. And then the National Register does not allow buildings to be moved from their original locations. But locally, here in Carmel, we do have a few historic buildings that have been moved, so it's just something for the board to consider. So after staff issued the determination of ineligibility, the applicant provided additional information, and he's here tonight to speak. But staff and the consultant do not feel that this additional information triggers the intensive historic evaluation, and there's no question this property maintains a special history and a very interesting one, but it doesn't meet the criteria for listing in the inventory. So the staff recommendation is tonight to issue a preliminary determination of ineligibility. It's still preliminary because there'll be a 10-day appeal period following your decision should you issue this. Alternatively, the board could express support for this process to continue on to the intensive phase, and we would just go from there. So we do have the applicant here tonight, and I'm also available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Any questions of Catherine from the board? No? Thank you. So, Mr. Dunham, would you like to address the board?
Board members, my name is Tom Dunham. My wife is Kim. We owned the property and fell in love with it back in 1998. The property from my perspective is a couple things about it that are kind of special. Catherine talked about the prior owners, Roy Frady's. I noticed that Arvid isn't on the phone, but his son was trying to be here tonight. Since Roy was born in 1901, that's a pretty good deal. But there's Roy Frady's and Keith Baldwin Evans, both of whom, and also Victoria Pope Evans. So the 3 of them were actually the people that were ultimately major players and part of what weaves Carmel together today is the place that it is. Roy being a carpenter, actually not a contractor, for M.J. Murphy at the time that the place was built. I do believe it's an M.J. Murphy home. Unfortunately, the permit from back then, 1925, number 957, isn't available to kind of prove that. But if you look back in time, with Roy being the carpenter and it being built actually right next to Murphy's lumberyard down there on Winnipero. And in 1925, from the historic consent statement, 80% of the homes up to that time were built by or designed by Murphy. There's some very specific design points in the house that kind of allude to the fact that it is a Murphy home. And knowing Murphy's personality, if you read a lot about him, which I know you all have, I don't think he's the type of guy that would let his carpenter have someone else build the house right next to the Murphy lumberyard. So he wasn't really that kind of a guy. So I do believe the house is a Murphy home. I think that's important from the standpoint of the discussion here being really about it's a subjective decision subjective decision about the word substantial, because this is all about the integrity of the home, whether or not it maintained enough of the integrity. And the reason I'm here before you today is, and thanks to Board Member Hall calling it back up for a little more discussion, but I'm here before you today to really, one, I'm glad you came for the tour, so you got a chance to actually see it for yourselves. Two, if you all feel that there wasn't a loss of substantial integrity to what the home was and what it was meant to be, then I would continue on with a more in-depth, the next phase, I guess, whatever you call that, in-depth review. So that the factor that Catherine and I have talked about, she's great, by the way, and is the second story. That's the biggest factor in all of this. The chimney, yeah, it's bigger because the code said it needed to be bigger. I didn't want it bigger. And it was moved, but the big thing is that second story addition. But if you look at the second story addition, and maybe you noticed it when you were there, it was done with the same rafter tails, if you will, that on the barge rafters that were on the original home. It has kind of design elements of the original home, like the oval window when you walk up to the front door. That was an original window, by the way, at the front door and the original door. Well, there's a lot of original in there. So it has the design elements of the house, and so I know we can't talk about the interior of the home being original, but I think my point is that it mitigates the changes on the second story, in my opinion, mitigate the fact that there was an addition, an unfortunate addition. Don't get me wrong. I know it takes away from what was originally built. But with that, I would say I'd really leave it in your hands and your capable backgrounds of what you've seen before to say, well, gee, this is a pretty significant house. You've got 3 people that played a major role. Victoria was instrumental in starting the Plaza Fuel and Supply Company, which was over at Bruno's Market, along with her husband Keith. So it's got a lot of history, and I know we have to fall within guidelines of the state and the federal and the local, but if you all feel that what you saw today is not a substantial reduction And there's the kicker, you know, substantial versus, well, bad. Then I'll go ahead and carry this forward, because I think I'm kind of an anomaly here in that I don't know how many people argue to come onto the resource list of the city, but when I started this project, looking at the history of the house, it was in 1999, and I came down here to this building and rummaged through all the files, and now they're all digitized, which is great. Thank you, Katie. I see you're on the line. Mm-hmm. Katie was a huge help finding all this information out, and also Sullivan Lang here on the planning desk was a great resource. But in any event, I started that way back then, and life got in the way, and then I've just now finished it, just really for my own edification. But I found so much about the city, and I thought, wow, I mean, this is something that should be known about this particular little house. So
great, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for walking over to the house and seeing it, and it's just been a great exercise. And I really want to thank Katie and everybody else that's helped me on this, and Catherine, you too, even though you recommended against it. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public wishing to address this application?
Catherine Gualtieri. It's very rare, as Mr. Dunham said, that this would be something that you don't like to speak against a homeowner who is supportive of historic preservation. That's true. However, I think the report done by Meg Clovis and the staff's thorough look at the property and the problems, to me, I remember back in years past where we had a small Percy Parks cottage up on, I think it was Santa Fe also, that it had a huge addition proposed for the back of it, and it overwhelmed in a big way the small cottage that was original on the site. This is not that bad. That was really it was like a 2,200 square foot addition on a very small cottage. This is not that way, and I think the owner's his enthusiasm for it is palpable. However, I think the fact that it was moved is one thing, and it's not in its favor, and also the fact that the second story is a very large second story that does affect its integrity. And the historic people who were mentioned in Catherine's report were not living in it at the time, it sounds like, from when the second edition was put on. But in my view, that alteration compromises severely the significance of the house, despite its history. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Anyone else wishing to address the board on this application?
Cindy Lloyd is online.
Okay, Cindy.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Cindy.
Thank you very much. Members of the Historic Resources Board, my name is Cindy Lloyd. I don't have anything germane to add to this application, but I just thought I might give you two little small points of historic interest. When my parents moved to Carmel permanently in 1935, my dad, although a journalist for the Montreal Gazette, had no job in Carmel, so he worked for Keith Evans delivering firewood. And I knew Keith Evans when I was growing up. I did not know Roy Freitas, but I lived in Roy's house, Roy and his wife's house, at Guadalupe and 7th, overlooking the Forest Theater, and I lived in it for 10 years. I rented it from his widow, who is Arvid's mother, and it was an absolutely gem of a house. So this has nothing to do with anything before you today, but I just thought I'd add some little points of interest. And yes, I have lived in a lot of houses in Carmel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy, for that. Mr. Dunn, you had something to add?
Yes.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Sure.
Cindy, hi, this is Tom Dunham. Arvid Frades is still alive and was hoping that he could be at this meeting, but I know he would just love to talk to you about your experience with the home, because he doesn't really have a lot of history, because he was pretty young when his parents passed away.
Thank you.
If you could somehow get in touch with me, I'd love to put you in touch with him.
Great, we can have some old neighbors meet up. We don't usually get to do that. So anyone else wishing to address the application?
Yes, David O'Neill, you can unmute yourself.
Sure.
David O'Neill, you can. Good evening, this is David O'Neill. Thank you so much, everybody, for helping the community. I wanted to just say I'm really impressed with Mr. Dunham for being interested in this, because I know a lot of people wouldn't want that for their home. I did actually for the project that I'm working on. But a couple of points I was curious about. It said that it could only be moved if it was for preservation. And it could be said that it was moved to preserve it because they had to build more commerce in that area. It's just something to think about. And of course, the chimney was a safety problem that they had to address. And it really does look like a Murphy home in its appearance. The one question that I really have is, when an addition to a historic home is more than 50 years old, does that addition become historic? So it's just a question that I put to you. And thank you all for your service, and hope you have a good evening.
Thank you, David. Marnie, do you want to address that? It's a good question.
So additions more than 50 years old could be found to be part of the historic fabric. We do have a number of homes on our historic inventory where that is the case. But it really all depends. I think in this case, we don't know who designed or constructed the additions. So we look at it on a case by case. So it depends. Sometimes yes.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to address the board in this application?
No one else online.
Okay. Seeing no one else, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Any comments from my fellow board members?
I have a question for Marnie. If the Historic Preservation Act or the local historic preservation protocol were in effect at the time before the addition was built, would it have been on the register then? Would it likely have been on the register then?
We don't believe so. We believe that the second story addition was not carried out in a manner that we would consider consistent with the Secretary's standards. So it's not something we would approve today on a historic home.
But were there no addition, would it have likely gone on the register? Or is there still too much question about it?
It's a good question. I think it's quite possible if it had remained a single story structure, it could potentially have been added. Because if it remained single story too, then the original chimney would still be intact. And it does appear that, there are original windows on the cottage, so it may have qualified without the second story addition.
But it still would have the problem of being moved, and we don't know for sure who built it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really don't have that much to say. I have to compliment the homeowner for the beautiful job he's done. It's an absolutely charming house. And I wish, it had passed all of these tests. But I'm afraid it hasn't. So that's about all I have to say.
Thank you. I first just want to compliment Mr. Dunham on your enthusiasm for Carmel and for the historic preservation in Carmel-by-the-Sea. And I do think it's just a charming, wonderful house. I guess in response to Kathy's question, because you can really see the kind of simple elegance of what was there. The entry swooping eave line was beautiful, and it's very simple arts and crafts home. I think that would, and with the fact that I think you could make a justification, it might be a Murphy. So I think without the second floor addition, in my mind, that would be a very good candidate for our inventory. But I do think the second story addition, unfortunately, doesn't have the same elegance and architectural quality I see in the original. There's a lot of these smaller little roof forms that are all broken up. It's not this nice, simple, elegant, refined building I see on the lower level. And it's, whenever you add second floor addition on what could be an historic resource, it's just really hard to pull that off and still have integrity. As Catherine was describing, sometimes you can do it by it being well back on the site. It's separated as a separate structure, maybe connected by a hyphen connection from the historic resource. But if you're actually putting a second floor addition directly on the resource itself, that's virtually impossible unless it's done in such a way that it's old enough to, which this one happens to be, but it would have to be, in my mind, integrated and make the quality, the architecture of the second level would need to meet the architectural quality of the lower level, and I don't think that's what's happening here. So unfortunately, I don't think it quite meets the eligibility requirements for our inventory. But I do certainly think it's a beautiful, charming house, and I really appreciate that you kept so much of the interior original. I think it just really speaks wonderfully of Carmel, and I can see what a wonderful place that is to live. And even the addition from the interior, I can see the light coming down from the stairs. I'm sure it's a great view from upstairs. So I don't know if we've ever considered this, but obviously the inventory is a deed restriction basically on the house, but if I don't see why homeowners can't create their own sort of historic designation with a deed restriction if you were so inclined, but I know that's kind of a hard ask when the city won't do it for you. But I can't imagine someone buying it would want to change it. It's really delightful. So thank you. So I would entertain a motion then, and I think the motion would be, since I think we agree, would be a preliminary determination of ineligibility.
I'll move that we determine it preliminary ineligible.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call. Okay, that's clear.
Okay, so Board Member Goodhue made the motion?
Yes,
Okay.
and it was seconded.
And seconded by, okay. Board Member Dyer?
Yes.
Board Member Goodhue?
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy?
Yes.
Thank you. So go back. I think any future, is there a director's report, I guess is the next one.
So I do have a couple things to mention this afternoon. The first is that the City Council recently issued a proclamation declaring the week of April 14th through 20th as National Volunteer Appreciation Week. And as part of this proclamation, they recognized the members of the Historic Resources Board. So I just wanted to share this proclamation with you. It says, whereas National Volunteer Week was first established in April 1974 by presidential proclamation and is observed the third week of April. And whereas this year's National Volunteer Week was observed from April 14th through 20th. And whereas the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea recognizes that the involvement of volunteers is vitally important in augmenting essential public services provided by city departments and our community. And whereas the City Council would like to recognize and thank the efforts of the volunteer groups and individuals that assist the city. And whereas the hours, work, and contributions these groups and individuals donate to the city during events, meetings, storms, village beautification, and village safety are immeasurable and an asset to the city and the community. Now therefore be it proclaimed that Dave Potter, Mayor of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea, on behalf of the City Council, thanks the following volunteer groups that assist the city, which includes the Historic Resource Board Commissioners.
You're welcome.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, so we do sincerely appreciate the time that you devote. We understand it's a volunteer position, but you are a tremendous asset to the community. And so your time and your efforts are very much appreciated. And kind of in that same vein, I know Board Member Hall is not here this afternoon, but today is her last official meeting on the Historic Resources Board. So I just wanted to give a special thanks to her for her participation and her contributions to the board. It has been a pleasure having her here. And we do hope to see her continuing to participate on the other side of the dais as part of the Carmel Preservation Association. So her term ends this month, and Catherine Galtieri has been appointed to fulfill the next term, which will start in June. But I really do want to thank Carol for her efforts, for her time. It's really been a pleasure having her on the board, asking us questions and really making us think about the information that we provide and how we do that in a way that helps facilitate your decision making. So a couple some updates on upcoming meetings. Tomorrow is Tuesday, May 21st at 4:30. There'll be a budget workshop here at City Hall that is open to the public. Then on Wednesday, there'll be an Urban Forest Master Plan Community Meeting. That will start at 6 p.m. and it'll be over at the Sunset Center in Carpenter Hall. And then just a reminder that next Monday, May 27th, is Memorial Day. So the city offices will be closed. There will be the annual Memorial Day ceremony at Devendorf Park, and that starts at 11 a.m. And that concludes the director's report.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would also want to thank Carol for her participation. It was a pleasure to serve with her, and even though we oftentimes disagree, I really respected her love of Carmel, and I'm sure we'll see more of her participating.
And for bringing Bubbles.
And to bringing Bubbles. We'll miss Bubbles, although I wasn't going to touch Bubbles. But
It's not the same anymore.
I know, it's not. You need that little animal. But
You need
yes.
to bring your dog.
Yeah.
Should I bring mine down?
But thank you for Carol, and we look forward to seeing Catherine at the next meeting up here. And any future agenda items? No? Okay, with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Pleasure meeting you all.
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Dunham.